You're listening to the 40 Fit Radio podcast, dedicated to the 40-plus community. Join us as we discuss the truth about fitness and health using science, reason, and the experiences of our host and content experts. Welcome to the 40 Fit Nation. Hey, welcome back to the 40 Fit Radio podcast and the 40 Fit Nation. I'm your host, Coach D, and today we're going to talk about the second part of a series on overtraining. We talked in the first overtraining podcast about the signs and symptoms, and today we're going to talk about prevention and treatment. So we're going to wrap that up today in a short podcast. Again, we're doing shorter length podcasts so that they're a little bit easier to digest, and you can be listening to these podcasts while on the road, on the way to work, or in between the gym, or on the way home. So also a little plug here about Starting Strength online coaching. If you're a master's aged individual, that's 40 plus or even younger than that, it doesn't matter, but definitely if you're a master's individual, if you will go to 40fit.com and go to the 40 Fit Radio podcast tab or the 40fit.com tab, click on that, and then go to the newsletter. Join our newsletter. We will send you a special promotional code that you can use to join Starting Strength Online Coaching. Get a Starting Strength coach that specializes in not only seeing weightlifters or lifters face-to-face, but also doing online coaching. And we have coaches who handle clients throughout the world. So a little shameless plug there for Starting Strength Online Coaching, and you can find out more information about the product and services that they provide at startingstrengthonlinecoaching.com. So if you need more info, that's where to go. So let's talk a little bit about overtraining and prevention and treatment. So first of all, last time we talked about all the different ways that overtraining, there's about 9 different signs and symptoms that can become present when someone has overtraining syndrome, overreaching syndrome. And those symptoms vary from individual to individual, from athlete to athlete. There are a lot of variables that are in play there that can affect how that syndrome or how those overtraining signs and symptoms present themselves. And so there is no one perfect model of presentation. I mean, it just changes from based on the maturity of the athlete, the individual's genetic potential, how well they're eating, how well they handle stress loads, how much exposure they've had in the past, the present, to physical and emotional and mental stressors, and all these different variables that are a significant player in how individuals will present when they have overtraining syndrome. But we won't go over all the signs and symptoms. You can go back and listen to that episode, but please do try to listen to these episodes as number 1, which would be the prior episode, and number 2, which would be this episode here. I think they'll fit together better when you go to listen to them together. So today we're going to talk a little bit about prevention and treatment. And the reason why we talk about signs and symptoms up front is the most important thing about treating or preventing overtraining syndrome is recognizing it. It's an awareness, a sense of self-awareness. And I've used this terminology, self-awareness, in the sense of how you are aware of your body's potential to recover, to handle stress loads, aches and pains, injury versus just tweaking something, and how aware of the stressors that your body is being placed under when it comes to your physical training program. And so that's the first step, is awareness. It's recognizing, I can't tell you how many clients and athletes, lifters, CrossFitters, whatever you want to call them, over the years that I've trained, and we're in the gym, and their performance really over a prolonged period of time, let's say a total of, maybe 2, 3, 4, 6 weeks, has just kind of flatlined. And they're not necessarily getting stronger. They're not improving in their high-intensity workouts. Their skill level's really not improving much. And they generally kind of feel, for lack of better terms, just stale in their training program. There's a lack of desire to want to train. And many times they just didn't recognize or don't recognize that they could be overtraining. There's this thought process, and it's very addictive. I mean, think about it. When you're in the gym and you start training. Or if you don't have an actual program, you start exercising. And you go into the gym and you're extremely sore within the next 3 to 5 days. I mean, you can barely walk. And you have, kind of what I call dinosaur, Tyrannosaurus Rex arms, T-Rex arms. They're just, your arms are just dying. Your legs are dying. It's hard to sit on a toilet. It's just killing you. But there's also a sense of accomplishment there, right? Because you think to yourself, wow, if I'm this sore, I must have done really good work. Well, no, that's kind of a misnomer, and that's not necessarily true. The soreness that you're experiencing could be due to a lack of activity and now just beginning new activities and developing soreness. But most likely it's the mode in which you were training. If you did a lot of eccentric work, if you did a lot of higher intensity work, or if you trained with a little too much volume to start off with, you could be pretty sore. But I'm going to be honest with you, in training lifters, barbell lifters over the years, barbell training doesn't appear to make individuals that sore after the first couple weeks of training. They just kind of get in a rhythm, get in a groove. And I mean, I've hit some PRs recently on the press, the deadlift, and the squat, and I have not been sore in trying to reach those goals. Now, connective tissue, a little tweaky every now and then. Yeah. Feel a little beat up every now and then. Yes. But in regards to feeling muscularly sore, like I've, done a workout that's made the muscle belly sore, no. And so some of that also is controlled by your diet and your rest and all the other recovery variables that we talked about before. So, but there's this thought process by the client sometimes that, wow, I'm really sore, so I must be getting better, man. I must be training right because it's making me so sore I can barely walk. And I found that a lot to be true in the CrossFit community. It's kind of, we wear it as a badge of honor almost, to where a lot of individuals, they equate the effectiveness or the efficacy of their program on how sore they're getting every time they train. And that is not true at all. That is not a good way to gauge your performance or your adaptation or your progression in your training program. And so a lot of times individuals, they're bebopping along. They're not getting stronger, like we talked about. They're not improving in high intensity interval times. If they're doing short interval sets, they're not getting more work done in less time, or it's taking less time to do more work. And, a lot of times they start to feel stale, like we talked about. They get aches and pains that they're not used to, and they just start to flatline in their performance. So that first thing is just becoming aware. And that's what I would ask you to do now. Think about your training program as a listener. Think about where you are in your training today and where you were 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 18 weeks, 24 weeks. Just keep going back. 32 weeks, keep going back. 6 months. Think going back. Have I progressed over the last year of training? Have I progressed over the last half a year, 6 months? Have I progressed in the last quarter? How have I done in the last month of training? And this doesn't mean that you're necessarily shooting to be a competitive athlete. This just means, is my training being effective? Am I feeling healthier, fitter, stronger, more able, more functional? And is this improving my overall quality of life? And that's key, is recognition. So that's the first thing. The second part about prevention and treatment is that you've got to really begin to treat both the physical and psychological symptoms. And I recommend that you treat the physical symptoms first. And when we're treating the physical symptoms of overtraining, we need to first of all make sure that we're optimizing our nutrition. We need to make sure that we're not under proteining, that we're lacking in enough protein grams to support muscular development, adaptation, protein synthesis, all those things we've talked about in prior episodes. For males, probably 200 grams of protein, and for females, somewhere around 150 grams of protein, plus or minus, based on their weight and on their athletic ability and size and frame and everything. So the other thing is we want to make sure we're getting enough carbs and fats. And especially on the carb side, we want to make sure that we're getting enough good, clean carbs, and that we're not restricting carbohydrates so much that we just don't have enough good energy to perform work, and that we're also not recovering well in the recovery cycle. And so that would be the second thing. So we want to make sure that we're optimizing nutrition. And I could say that my experience has been 9 times out of 10, people have not dialed their nutrition in for their training. They're either overeating or undereating. Very seldomly are they right on target. So if you use macros, use macros. If you like something like a ketogenic diet, that's whatever nutritional model you use, dial it in and make sure that it's adequate for your performance. And we'll talk more about nutrition in upcoming episodes because there's so many different philosophies there. I'm definitely not the expert there. I know enough to be dangerous and enough to support my own training and the training of my clients. But I think there's so much good information out there about all the different nutritional models that you need to be dialing that nutrition in, making sure that the nutrition is adequate. The third thing is you need to look at your sleep, rest, and recovery cycle. Are you allowing enough recovery time for adaptation? Because we've talked about in prior episodes this stress, recovery, adaptation, SRA. Stress, which would be the work that we perform. The recovery is what we do after that to allow our body to adapt. And then the adaptation cycle, obviously, is either an improvement in cardiovascular function, aerobic improvement, the growth of muscle, muscle protein synthesis, all these different things, improvement in mobility that we're hoping happen after we train, because why train if we're not pushing towards results? So that's the key there too. So we want to be making sure that we're getting enough sleep, that we're sleeping a minimum of 8 hours a night. I know some individuals can train and adequately do so on 6 hours a night of sleep, but I think somewhere between 7 to 8 is probably more appropriate. We want to make sure that we're getting deep sleep, that a dark room, cold room, no distractions. Try to avoid the use of artificial light, 2 hours before bedtime, computers, iPhones, all those things. And I'm the worst at that, man. Watching TV real late, watching a Netflix show or something like that, or also checking on, Instagram or emails on my phone or on my laptop, watching videos of clients lifting and doing programming or writing, working on some other computer file, and that stuff's just bad for your sleep late at night. And we'll talk about sleep more in future episodes and get deeper on that subject. But we need to make sure that you're sleeping enough, that you're resting enough, that you're resting not only your body but also your mind, and that you're doing some things that you enjoy along the way while you're training. And that kind of brings us to the second thing to talk about, and that is psychological stress. Sometimes we just need a break from training. Or we need a change. Sometimes it's a change in exercise mode, a type of exercise. Maybe you've been doing a strength program for 6 months and you've just been hitting it very, very hard, 3 days a week, linear progression. Then you progress to intermediate and advanced training. You progress to something like, a Texas method or 4-day split or whatever, but just really been in the grind for 6 months plus, and your body just needs a break. So maybe mix it up, reduce your volume and intensity. We'll talk about that in just a second, and continue to strength train and I'll use this term carefully, for maintenance, quote unquote, but we're really not maintaining, but for the, I guess you would say, to support the maximum level of strength possible and still allow recovery needed for the potential that you've been overtraining. Let's put it that way. And so then what you might do is you might do some other type training. You might do some yoga. You might add that in. You might do some swimming. You might go out and do some kayaking or something. But just mix it up and give yourself scheduled breaks from training so that your mind and you can rest from that. Because I tell you, there is a certain point in your training, especially when you're talking about barbell training, where you're walking down that road and you've just been hitting it every single week. You have a routine. There's kind of a rhythm. Like for me, I've been doing heavy, light, medium program as of recently. So Mondays are always heavy. The Wednesdays are always light, and then I either train Friday or Saturday for my medium day. And so I'm just bebopping along, doing my training. I tell you, every Monday, those Mondays are tough because, I know that's going to be my heavy day. It's just mentally daunting knowing that, especially when those loads get really, really heavy, and the failure rate is more and more self-evident that I'm going to fail these reps. And so it just mentally gets tough. So just switching that up a little bit. Maybe I even go to something to where I do heavy, light, medium still, but heavy's on Wednesday instead of Monday. So I just switch it up a little bit so that coming out of the weekend, the first thing that hits me is not a heavy day. And I've done stuff like that, or changing up the program altogether. If I need a break, especially if I've hit some PRs and we've made a good run up and I just need to give myself a little break. So, resting from the psychological stress is very important too. And, and then we also talked about changing the volume and intensity in programming. And, when we talk about fitness training or strength training, and we've said this in previous episodes, there's really only two things you can change. I mean, you could argue that there's three. One would be exercise mode or type. The other two would be volume, how much is being done, whether that's in tonnage, sets and reps, how many times a week, the frequency, how many times a day, a month, whatever, every 2 weeks. You could make that timeline be whatever you want it to be. And then intensity. How hard is it? How heavy is it? How high intensity is it? How fast is it? How explosive is it? And that would be rated as intensity. So when you start to experience this overtraining, you might dial back the volume at first. And this is one thing that I kind of recommend sometimes. I have found, especially with older trainees, that whether it be CrossFit or it be strength training, classical barbell strength training, that if I'll dial back the volume some, maybe drop a training session a week or reduce the set and reps. Maybe I'll go from 3 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 5 to 2 sets of 5, and dial the volume back more than I will the intensity, then they generally will pick up their recovery faster. They'll start to adapt. I can kind of keep the intensity fairly high and keep the loads. I just dial back the volume so that they have less volume to recover from. And they actually do very well, and they actually keep their strength, and they are able to even progress sometimes and get through that stale part of their training or that plateau part of their training. And then we just kind of keep going up. If that doesn't work, then what I do obviously is I dial back the intensity. So if they're a CrossFitter, I would reduce the high intensity interval training sessions per week. I might make one of their sessions that used to be a HIIT session a little bit more of a skill workout or mobility workout or active recovery day. The number one thing is I find it very difficult for the average master's individual to train more than 4 to 5 days a week and adequately recover from that level of training. It's just too much volume. It's too much intensity, especially if they're really training. Now, if they're going in a gym and they're doing some circuit machines and then jumping on the treadmill, they might be able to do that every day because there's really no significant stressor. Their body has kind of reached kind of a homeostasis or a flat spot to where they're tolerating it very well, and they can do that, So, but I think that on average, 4 to 5 times a week is probably the max, especially if you are doing a real goal-oriented training program. So the last thing I think that you can do to help to treat overtraining syndrome is to look back historically. Again, this along goes with recognizing and having a sense of self-awareness. Look back at where you were 3 months before. Have you improved? Have you improved in the last 6 weeks? If you haven't, if you've kind of flatlined and you're doing the same thing, mix it up. Change it, And we don't want to change it based on constant variance or anything like that. We really want to change it based on the fact that what you're doing in your program and whatever progressional model you're using is not allowing you to get stress, recovery, and adaptation. That's what this whole thing is about, guys. It's all about that one simple physiological model. Are the stressors that we're applying to your body in your fitness program, your training, are you being able to recover from those things so then you can adapt to them? So, recently I went on an elk hunt. I went on an archery elk hunt. I packed in, it was a 5-6 day hunt. For 3 of the days, I was by myself. I packed in up to about 11,790 feet, set a spike camp, a tent, and like I said, I'm a bow hunter, so I was in Colorado, and I was amazed at how my body did this year. I'm a year older. Every year I get a year older. It's my 7th archery elk season to hunt elk in the state of Colorado. And I think I had, over the course of 5 days, the last 2 or 3 days, a buddy of mine met me. We went back up, and then we just went in and out each day. But I recorded on my GPS that every time we stepped into the woods, I stepped into the woods. We did a total of, for the week, 30 miles in hiking and climbing with an elevational gain of over 10,000 feet. And man, I tell you, I was really surprised how well we did and how well I did in that. And I think the number one key for me was I've been doing a linear progression strength program for several years, but for the last year, really hitting it harder, being more consistent. And then I do 1, maybe 2 conditioning days a week. And right before I had left for this trip, PR'd, like I said earlier, my squat, my press, and my deadlift. And was just feeling great. But I had to PR before I left. I was hoping I wouldn't hurt myself, but I had to PR because I've been working so hard and being consistent in training, and I didn't want to take a week off and then try to PR or even a week and a half. I wanted to go ahead and get in the gym, see what I could do. So I dialed back my intensity and volume a little bit right before I left, and spent a couple days just trying to do some heavy singles. You know, I think it's key that you develop that sense of self-awareness, that you look back at your logs, that you historically journal, like we've talked about in a recent episode on writing things down, that you journal how your training is progressing. So there we have it, guys. We've got a little information on overtraining. Now, obviously, there are a lot of other things we could talk about. We could talk about more in-depth nutrition, supplements, getting your blood work done, also having a regular medical checkup to make sure that something else is not causing overtraining. Like, let's say you're anemic or your blood sugar's too high. You've got other issues that are going. You've got hypertension or hypercholesterol, and so those are all other things to consider. But the first thing to do is to look back over that training, develop a sense of self-awareness, dial your training back a little bit, change your training, make sure you've got good nutrition, make sure you're sleeping and resting well. Also, associate rest as part of your training. Remember that sleep and rest and not training is training. That is part of your training program. You have to look at the rest cycle as actually part of your overall program. It's not stepping out of your program and not working out. If you are working out and you're doing strength training or you're doing high intensity interval training, some type of CrossFit or aerobic training, long, slow distance, whatever it is, the rest part of your day or days or weeks or months, they are part of your overall program. So that's important to recognize. Well, man, guys, it's been great to have you on the 40 Fit Radio podcast today. If you'd like to get more information about 40 Fit, you can go to 40fit.com and you can go to the 40 Fit tab or the 40 Fit Radio podcast tab. And we also have all the previous episodes listed there in chronological order. Remember to also go to the Starting Strength Online Coaching.com website and check out that product and what that could do for you if you're interested in doing a barbell program, which I think every master should. You can also find us on Instagram, and we are at 40 Fit Radio, and my personal Instagram is at DL Deaton. And you can also email us through the website at 40fit.com and go to our Facebook community group page, which is 40 Fit Masters Community Group. Man, it's been great to have you guys, and thank you for joining the 40 Fit Nation.